Hi, welcome to the Libertarian Alternative. My name is Mark Selzer, and the Libertarian Alternative is an educational television show brought to your community by the Libertarian Party. Thanks for watching. Today we'll be talking about globalization. A lot of talk has been in the media for the last few years about the term globalization. Today we'll be finding out what it is, and we hear a lot of negative things about globalization. We'll see, once we know what it is, we'll try to see if there's any positive aspects to it, if possibly it's not all as bad as we hear it is sometimes in the media. And today, to discuss that, we have from the Cato Institute, you are?
Tom Palmer.
Tom Palmer. And what is the Cato Institute?
It's a non-profit, non-partisan, non-political public policy think tank in Washington, D.C., and our goal is to do research on the functioning of the free society and on the legitimate role and the limitations on governmental powers.
Mm-hmm. So you issue policy papers and you try to influence public discussion and political action.
We try to elevate it, if you will, and we try to educate the members of Congress about the limits on their powers and also on the wisdom or lack of wisdom of policies that they might choose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly it seems that a lot of, I'm sure we'll be going into economics here, a lot of the, once you have some knowledge of economics, a lot of the things the politicians try to fix certain economic situations obviously are going to backfire. And it seems as if a lot of the lawmakers have very little or very limited knowledge of the economy and how it works.
I would say that a lot of members of Congress and politicians in general believe in magic. They don't believe in cause and effect. They think that if they say the magic words, a special law that will create more health care or what have you, that it'll just happen. Mm-hmm. They don't have to investigate how the economy actually functions, how wealth is produced, and so on. And quite often there are a lot of unintended consequences to actions. Well-meaning people, decent, nice folks, will support a policy, and they don't stop to think, is it going to actually achieve what they hope to achieve with it? Mm-hmm. And that's our role, is to be able to look at these things in a systematic and scientific and clear-headed way and provide some guidance to policymakers on whether their policies are going to have good or bad consequences.
Right, because certainly if you really believe every American should have access to affordable health care, which I certainly don't disagree with, I certainly agree with that, how are we going to accomplish that? You know, I look at some of the experiments that I've seen with medicine in other countries, and I see there's a lot of problems there. But that's a whole other show. What we're talking about today is globalization, although this does affect, I think, some things to do with medicine. What is globalization? This word is thrown about constantly on talk radio by the progressive activist groups, things like that. What is globalization?
Well, first off, the term is used very widely on both the right and the left, and there are right-wing anti-globalization activists, people like Pat Buchanan or Jean-Marie Le Pen in France, and there are left-wing anti-globalization activists like Ralph Nader. What's interesting is that they are united in their opposition to free trade. Typically, when they use the term globalization, what they have in mind is just a list of all the bad things about the world, all the things that they don't like, war, poverty, disease, and so on. That's not a useful way to begin a conversation about policies, because it obviously biases it in one direction. If that's how you define it, then any reasonable person is going to be against it. Instead, from an economic perspective, you want to look at it as changes in policies, specifically the diminution or elimination of state-enforced restrictions on exchange across national borders. So if people on one side of a border are able to get their hair cut or trade vegetables with each other, should they be stopped from doing that if one happens to be on the other side of a national border? Mm-hmm. In the U.S., we don't do that. If you're in Arizona and the other person is in California, there's no restriction on trading between the two persons, just as if they were both in Arizona or in California. Mm-hmm. What we've seen over the past 50 years or so is a slow diminution in the restrictions that the state imposes on exchange that are cross borders. So that's what I mean by globalization, it's what most economists mean by the term. And then the consequence of that, the increasingly integrated global system of production and commerce and exchange that emerges as a consequence. So an automobile today it's hard to say it's an American-made or a Japanese-made or a German-made automobile. One part is produced in one country, another part in another one. They may be assembled in a third.
So what this is basically talking about is just the fact that all of the economies of all the countries around the world are being more and more interconnected at this point.
Let me make a slight amendment to that. All of the economies of the countries that are prospering are becoming more interconnected. There is a growing divide in wealth in the world, and it's between countries that are taking part in globalization, are getting richer, and those that are not are falling behind or getting poorer. The most obvious example is North Korea, not part of the global economy at all, virtually no trade with the outside world. They're starving to death.
Literally.
It's not an overstatement.
Hundreds of people a month, a week, I've heard.
We don't know because it's such a closed society, but there are credible rumors of cannibalism emerging. That's one of the things that happens when people are driven mad by hunger. That's the most extreme example, obviously. But if you take many of the countries of Africa, one of the reasons, and it's a complex story, but one of the reasons for their poverty is that most African countries have enormously high restrictions on trade across their national boundaries. Not only with Europe and the United States, Latin America, and Asia, but also just with the neighboring country. And the consequence is a massive lost opportunity for wealth-enhancing exchange among people. So those countries that are prospering because they're part of the global economy. Countries that are not part of the global economy are not becoming richer.
Is this part of a false way of looking at economics? For instance, people don't really understand that when you make money, you really do make money. You know, you really do. There is really more money produced every time someone makes money. When I put $100 in the bank, they don't keep it there with a rubber band around it with my name on it. It goes back into circulation. So literally, as I'm making money, I'm really creating more wealth. I'm not taking a slice from somebody else's pie and putting it in my pie. Everyone has their own pie, and they kind of make their pie bigger, as big as they can, and you don't do that, and you make your pie bigger by making other people's pies bigger. Rather than, people seem to have this idea now, looking at the economy, that when Bill Gates makes $1 billion, he somehow took $1 from 1 billion people, or $10 from however many people, and that money was taken. It's the same amount of money. There doesn't seem to be an idea that wealth is created through commerce and exchange. That seems to be an idea that's missing from people's general understanding of an economy and how it works.
I think a lot of people understand that within the context of a national economy, for example, most people I think understand that if you're producing a new product, you are adding value, you're producing wealth, and you exchange it with other people. The difficulty that they have in seeing sometimes is between national economies, somehow the sense that if one is getting richer, the others must be doing
the other must be getting poor.
They're getting poor. But that doesn't follow. Furthermore, it doesn't follow that if other countries are becoming richer, it's bad for us. Now, your typical sort of protectionist, whether they're the right-wing or the left-wing variety, says, oh my gosh, it's terrible, the Canadians are getting richer, or the Thai, or the Taiwanese, or what have you. But in fact, from a more sophisticated perspective, the perspective of an economist, we should be happy if the Canadians become richer, not only because it's a nice way to feel about other people, but it's also in our interest
if our neighbors. They can buy more of our stuff.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. That when wealth is created in other countries, when they become richer, it means they're better customers for our goods as well. That is to say, they have more to trade with us. And so the international trading system is what we call a positive sum game. All can benefit on the condition that trade is free. Now, there are some occasions a country invades another country, it's a negative sum game, right? Or at least a zero sum game. Someone benefited, another person lost. Typically,